integrative reflections. For pretty much every topic that we're covering, you're going to be writing a critical theological reflection on a contextualized experience. And basically what you're doing is you're working your way through the practical theology model in the course, which is available week 1 to learn and follow along with. And you're going to run your experience in this practice through the practical theology model. And there's 5 steps for that. First is you're going to name and describe what that looks like in your spiritual community. What has been your practices? What's the biblical passages used to support your perspective or justifying the practices that you might have? And then you're going to analyze that practice in light of your diverse contextual factors. So what are your cultural realities or the economic realities that have shaped the way you do what you do? Are there specific religious understandings or traditions, the denominational practices, social realities that have come into play into why you've engaged in what you're doing? And the biggest part of this whole thing is you're engaging with Scripture, and that's an exegetical engagement, theology, Christian history, concerning your practice. And you want to analyze this in light of the course content. So you don't have to go outside of the course to do extra research if you don't want to. You can just use the books and the resources that have been available, the biblical passages that have been a part of the conversations we've had in the course through the prezes or in the course readings itself. When I also say here, when you engage with Scripture, I'm looking at having you do that exegetically, which doesn't mean go find a Scripture and then say this is what this justifies what I'm thinking, or whatever that might be. I want you to actually do some work. Go find a commentary. And in this case, especially since so many students are very remote, if you're going to use a Bible verse that's also been used by one of the authors for this week, and they're talking about that Bible verse, you can use that as a commentary, so to speak, an illumination on that passage. And the reason for that being is, if we just used our own interpretation of Scripture, even though the Holy Spirit's active and part of that, it will always be through a lens, so to speak, of our culture and context and ethnic background. So what we're doing is we're inviting other voices into the conversation. So if you're using Scripture in this section, but you don't have some kind of perspective beyond your own experience with that passage, I'm going to be marking down for that, because I'm really looking at how do we broaden and start thinking about all these other voices and intertwining them into an integrative reflection. And that's another part of that integrative reflection. We can sometimes just get really good at this person says that, this person says that, this person says that, and therefore I'm going to believe it's this. And what I'm actually looking for is that you start weaving those different lines of thought together. And one quick way of seeing how you're doing that is when you're finished and you go back to look at the edit, you'll see a lot of ibids. And if you have a lot of ibids in your footnotes, then that's an indication that you haven't actually integrated the thought, but you're just telling me that that's what that person thinks, this is what that person thinks, this is what that person thinks. And that's really a report. I'm not looking for a report. I'm really looking that you've integrated and start developing kind of a new perspective on what it means to engage in this practice theologically. And then what you're going to do is share stories. You say, well, didn't we already share stories? But this is a little different. In this case now, you're going to be sharing stories, experiences from your community in light of what you've just learned. So you're looking for ways to help illuminate what you're learning theologically into your own context. You're bringing it back in so that the people in the community would say, yeah, I can see how we've already been engaging, or we're already naturally inclined to do that theologically. And the fifth thing is to discern and shape a new praxis. So you're basically saying, here's where we've been, here's why we've been doing what we've been doing, culturally, exegetically, religiously, economically, whatever it might be. Here's what it means to think theologically about these things. That's your third thing. The fourth is, here's how that has looked in our community. And then fifth, here's a practice or two that we could try out to help align the practices of our community with where God's kingdom is going. You'll notice that the grading rubric itself primarily focuses on that third part. Most people are really good at being able to share their own stories and where they're coming from. So this is really an opportunity to start thinking exegetically and theologically and integrating those worlds together. One other piece on the integrated reflections is this is the makeup of your signature assignments. So as you're turning these in and then getting feedback from me on them, you're going to shape those thoughts and responses and recompile everything into one big assignment at the end of the quarter. So these are building blocks towards completing your signature assignment. I'll talk a little bit too about due dates and my expectations on that. But I do want to make an appeal here that there's 50 students in this course, a little over 50 students between two sections. And getting your assignment on time will be very helpful to me. And so I will not be giving credit for any late assignments because there isn't going to be time to go back and grade assignments that are late. So I do ask that you keep these things in on time and you work with me as the quarter goes. And if you're falling behind, that we really address this very quickly, because we won't be able to go back as the 10 weeks do tend to go by incredibly swiftly.